To find their seats so we can resume our meeting. I have a quorum. So we are going to have staff bring forward our next chapter of this discussion. We're going to talk about Commerce Future Land Use Designation Text Amendment. Oh, boy.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioner. Lisa Amara, Zoning Director. So this item is number 12 on the agenda. It's the Commerce Future Land Use Designation. And this is a text amendment to the comprehensive plan, and it would be adopted today. If it is adopted, it would be adopted by ordinance. This was initially initiated back in February. It was discussed at the AgReserve workshop last year. It was transmitted in May. And there's two parts. One is creating a new light industrial future land use designation, and that would be allowed in the urban suburban tier, called Commerce. And the other aspect is setting up policies for this designation in the AgReserve. So this slide recaps. Right now we have two industrial land use designation, regular industrial, which allows light industrial and general industrial uses, and economic development center. So the first part is creating a light industrial land use designation. We feel one is warranted in the urban suburban tier, a land use designation that can come in and we can allow light industrial uses and no heavy auto repair, no heavy uses, and allow along major corridors in the urban suburban tier. This could allow additional storage opportunities and also some more employment opportunities. So that first part establishes criteria and standards for where this would be in the urban suburban tier. So, and here's some examples of what we would consider light industrial uses and heavy industrial uses. Notice there's an orange line through the word distribution, and I'll talk about that later. So that's one part. And the second part is in the AgReserve. So as we talked about previously, in 1999, the Board of County Commissioners said, don't do any more industrial in the AgReserve. The consultant proposed 350,000 square feet at the Boynton and Turnpike and Atlantic and Turnpike because in their vision, they wanted a well-rounded community. You heard a lot earlier how the consultants had anticipated we would have multifamily in the tier, and none of that actually came to be. They also anticipated that to have a well-rounded economy, we'd have industrial and employment opportunities. However, in 1999, the board said no. And they said no industrial in the tier. However, staff didn't ban industrial in the tier in the comp plan because there was already 70 acres of industrial that predated the master plan. So since 1999, we have adopted, the applications have come forward and the board has adopted several sites for industrial. One of them was Sunflower, and without a prohibition and without policy guidance, any property in the AgReserve could come in through the future land use amendment process and ask for industrial. There's no location requirements, there's no use restrictions, it could be heavy, it could be auto repair, and preserve is required only for MUPD and over 16 acres with an industrial flue. With a planned industrial park, there's no preserve requirement, and for IL zoning, there's no preserve requirement. And this is where we are today. And so this slide shows we've had almost 300 acres of applications come forward asking for different requests. To date, the board has adopted 28 acres, 0.6 of new industrial in the tier since 1989. And this slide is really critical, and a lot of the people that are going to come out today are going to say that we're destroying the AgReserve by establishing this land use designation. But with or without this amendment today, these 6 items will be before you in November asking for industrial in the AgReserve because, as I said, there is nothing stopping any property from applying for industrial. So there's 80 acres proposed and about 1.57 million square feet of commercial. So no matter what happens today, you'll see these in November. But what we tried to do with this amendment is we tried to narrow in the request a little bit so some of the more noxious uses wouldn't be allowed on these sites. And as said previously, a multiple use plan development zoning for any of these sites would require a preserve over 16 acres today, but planned industrial park development, so that's kind of like the Vista Center, If you did a mix of different variety of uses, you wouldn't have a preserve requirement in industrial. And if you did straight IL zoning, you wouldn't have an industrial preserve requirement. So here's the sites. There's LG Sports Turf. There's 5 acres. It's west of State Road 7. It's next to an existing commercial industrial site. There's more in Connolly. That's just also adjacent to that site. Both of these would qualify for commerce under the proposed language. And I'll note that they're across from the hospital. The hospital did not have a preserve requirement with that institutional flu. Boynton Commerce is across from the Melrose PUD. Remember last month or the month before we had that on the zoning agenda, we had the Melrose community come out. That's on the edge of the urban-suburban tier in the Ag Reserve. That site is proposing 15 acres of industrial. We have the BC Commerce Center, which is adjacent to the Turnpike. That's proposing 9.26 acres. We have EJKJ Industrial, which is north of Sunflower, south of Atlantic Avenue, and on the west side of State Road 7. State Road 7 Business Plaza, which is 40 acres across from Perro Farms. It's at Happy Hollow Road. This is the only site today that would have a preserve required if it was to do multiple use plan development. All of the other ones, we wouldn't request that if they were under 16 acres. So again, that's the recap of those sites. So when we were at the transmittal hearing, we had received a lot of information from the public, some opponents to this concept and some supporters of the concepts, and all of the applicants, all 6 applicants as well. And we had a meeting, and we met with representatives from Cobra and Sarah and the agents for these applications, and anyone who had provided written comments in May. We had a meeting. And so I went through all of those points of contention with them, and we were able to achieve consensus on a lot of them, but not all of them. So this slide goes through where consensus was achieved and where it wasn't. So we proposed at transmittal 5 acres minimum. However, the board transmitted 3 acres minimum, which is fine. We're adding a cap of 50 acres proposed by some of the residential communities. They felt that anything bigger than 50 acres would be too regional. So we're supportive of that, and we haven't heard any opposition on that 50-acre cap per site, not total for the tier. We heard a lot of feedback on access and frontage, and we agreed that it would make sense to require both frontage and access, not just frontage. No one is arguing on that one. On the locations, there was consensus achieved that it would be on State Road 7, Atlantic, Boynton as transmitted. We recommended at transmittal not west of State Road 7, but as you saw from that slide, a couple of this, there is a valid basis, and I know Marty Perry's here, he's been talking about it for years, that if west of State Road 7 on Boynton and Atlantic really don't have a lot of residences, and if sites were to apply and they were adjacent to an existing industrial or commercial site, maybe that warrants asking. So we agreed that we would allow them west of State Road 7 only if contiguous to an existing commercial or industrial site. There's consensus on that one. Everyone agrees no heavy industrial uses and no commercial vehicle uses, because that's skirting the commercial cap. We had an oversight about office. We didn't mention in the transmittal however, it's really critical for office warehouse that you have for industrial uses, you're going to have a need for office. That's a minor clarification to say that if you're doing a commerce proposal, of course, if you have your accessory office, that's not subject to the commercial cap. I mean, I don't know if there's any industrial uses that don't have an office component. It's just an oversight on our part. Distribution had a lot of discussion. Then staff's proposed that a distribution type of use might be acceptable. However, we've got a lot of feedback that those major multimodal transportation facilities that are huge and regional in nature shouldn't be allowed in the tier. We'll have to come back with the ULDC revisions to really refine that language, because I wasn't able to get any information from the interested parties that narrowed in the scope of how those words would limit those type of uses, other than we wouldn't allow distribution facility. We would allow office warehouse, and a lot of the smaller distribution is a tenant out of an office warehouse bay. Those would be acceptable under this proposal. And then lastly is the preserve area requirement. Staff recommended that over 16 acres should be subject to a preserve, and there's a lot of discussion at that. And if you look at those, all of this, really there's only a handful of sites that would be bigger than 16 acres. So with this site, this slide, we put in the published version of the report no mention of preserve. Well, that defaults back to 16 acres. So we need to fix that. That was a little bit of an oversight. So what we would do is the top option would be what the board transmitted, which is there's no preserve over 16 acres. I'm sorry? 50 acres. But however, if a commerce came in with residential, of course it's going to be subject to whatever residential preserve there is. So that's the first option. And then, the other option is doing staff recommendation at transmittal, which is for the 16 acres. So what the board transmitted was no preserve until you hit 50 acres. And that's the clarification of the first one, or you could always do, go back to the 16 acres. And basically a lot of the people are going to come out and they're going to speak in a minute, and they're going to focus a lot on the preserve. So there we have it. So if you stick with transmitted, there wouldn't be a preserve until you hit 50 acres, but we're putting a cap on 50 acres, so there's no preserve. Or you could reconsider the 16 acres. We had interested parties. Stephanie sends out a big interested parties email. And there we have it. Actually, that slide is missing one thing. I don't know where it went. But one additional item of contention is on this slide. So we received comment from the Delray Alliance, and I don't know if this isn't going to give me an error. We received comment from the Delray Alliance that we shouldn't allow commerce south of Atlantic Avenue. So when we met with the interested parties, we said, okay, well, we can't not allow this one in red. It already applied, and it's north of industrial, so we're amenable to that one coming through, and that would be north of Rio Grande Boulevard across the street. However, we did concur that if you move any further south of where that industrial for Sunflower is, you're getting into large lot residential communities, and it might not be appropriate to have industrial development right outside them. However, if the board were to reconsider commercial uses in the future, that might be an ideal opportunity to put some office uses, but for this, we're just doing industrial, and we didn't think, and that was an area that you'll hear feedback from, because there's no consensus on a couple of parties on that one. So, staff recommends approval of the modifications we're presenting today, and the PLC recommended approval in the urban suburban tier. They recommended denial in the ag reserve, which was actually a tie, but for practical purposes, it ends up being a denial. The board transmitted it 5-2 for the ag reserve, and then in the urban suburban tier. So I think that summarizes everything of where we've come since May.
Okay, thank you. Just one question. Again, I understand that you're trying to minimize the impact going south. Delray Alliance wanted you to stop at West Atlantic. You're looking at Rio Grande, but right below the Sunflower is a site that's sort of sandwiched in between that and another, the horse stable there. I'm wondering why we're trying to stop and keep that parcel out.
When we did a field visit of the site and we looked at the characteristics, rather than a vehicular-based industrial-style use, we thought that maybe commercial office might be more appropriate. However, we don't have that in our menu of the text amendment today, but the board could still allow, the board could take out the Rio Grande cap Staff's real priority is to allow it for that red one at minimum, because we already approved the other one. It's a policy decision if the board would want to allow it further south. Staff's, we just concurred with Delray Alliance.
I mean, it just seems silly, that little spot there that we're ignoring. All right, we'll see what kind of comments we get. All right, no lights are on yet. Let's go to public comment. We have 21 cards, so we have about an hour. Don't feel obligated to use all of your 3 minutes.
That 21 figure, Mayor, may have grown a little bit.
No, we're done.
No.
21, we stop.
All right. Well, here are the first lucky 21. Judy Hill, and then Roby Devil. I'm going to get it right at some point. DeVille.
And just for the clarification, please identify yourself at the microphone.
Hello,
for
good
the clerk.
afternoon. I'm Judy Hill, and I live on 9718 Happy Hollow Road, which is a small private road in the Ag Reserve, just north of Atlantic and just east of 441. I operate a 10-acre horse farm there, and I've lived there for 20 years. And I also reside on the property, and I manage it myself, along with a man that works for me. And we board private horses. I'm concerned about changing the zoning to light industrial on a piece of property that would touch my horse farm. It's a grave concern to us. Traffic and concrete and lights and pollution are not indicative to horses, and horses are by nature skittish and fearful of scary things, and it would put, I'm concerned what that's going to do to my business along with my residents, because I'm there, I live there, and it would be a big change for our little street, which is a private street, and I'm just really against having this. I happen to own industrial warehouses in Boynton Beach, and they're in an industrial park, and nobody lives next to the warehouses. And to have warehousing or some kind of distribution center on property that touches my farm is not what I would want to have happen. Okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments.
All right, next we'll have, is Roby here in the chamber? Okay. Then John Channing and Andrew Rips. And then following John Channing and Andrew Rips, we'll have Barbara O'Donnell on deck and Joseph O'Donnell.
Go for it.
Great. Good morning, afternoon, actually. My name is Andrew Rips. I'm the president of Tierra del Rey, the HOA. Thank you very much for your service. I'm a 25-year resident of Palm Beach County, Del Rey, Boca, and then back to Del Rey. We are an equestrian community, a multi-acre lot, and so, Mayor, that little lot you were talking about is contiguous to one of our entries of our private roadway, and it actually backs up to one of our residents. And we've done the homework, so for us it's very important to reject that idea south of the Grand, and I'll tell you why. Besides being a private road, we're an equestrian community and the ag. We're residents that live with animals, live with the farming, live with our gardens, and frankly keep to ourselves. We've done the homework meeting with people who purchased that lot, and I believe caveat emptor. And it's been zoned that way. There was a nursery before it, and unfortunately, when we met, you have not seen the plan, but we have. And so even commercial or office space, you're looking at maybe 80 employees, 80 automobiles. And when it comes to distribution, if you look at my background as a healthcare executive, Distribution 724, even if it's storage, even if it's cold storage. And so in front of our private roadway, we're very concerned about our core mission, safety, welfare. If you look at that one annex property in front of this residential corridor of Rio Poco, it's that 1 acre lot's been there for years. It was almost grandfathered in the master plan. And frankly, as a result, it's a pickup place. Good pizza, by the way. Pepperoni and eggplant parm are our favorites. And a dental office. We do support one of the projects north of this Rio Grande. We think that will round off that Wawa corner. We are pro-growth, and we understand the struggles you have. Lastly, I want to thank Mr. Fisher and Mr. Buckley. Hello. I'm glad ties are in. They came out that other property is not a horse stable. It's a cricket field. It's listed on the internet as a cricket field. It's a nuisance. When I read the article in Palm Beach County that you recovered $250,000, that property is currently owes this county a lot of money and has a misuse. And so between Mr. Fisher and Mr. Buckley taking a ride in our community, we're solving a few problems. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a
Oh, I'm
handout.
sorry, we have the,
It's a handout that I'll submit. I didn't make
could you
copies.
give it to the young lady right here?
Thank you very much.
Hold on.
Before I start, I just want to say that the pizza is very good.
I'm going to put a hold on you for a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Mayor.
Kerner?
Thank you.
And then, well, okay, Commissioner Sacks first.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what development you,
Tierra Del Rey.
Tierra Del Rey.
Yeah, we have a south
Okay.
entrance in the north, and the north is Lorena. And that parcel that was referenced south of Rio Grande is where there's a distribution center and office being considered, which would just be terribly unsafe.
So Tierra Del Rey fronts to 441.
It does,
isn't it? It's on the west side
correct?
of 441. Do you have a back, I mean, is there any exit from the back at
We
all?
do not.
Okay, so and how many residences are in Tierra Del Rey?
We have,
Approximately.
yeah, we have 72 parcels there. There are 2.5 to 5 acre parcel owners.
And when the staff referenced that little section there, let me refer, if you could, just 1 second. Lisa, what was that parcel that that was outlined? What was the applicant wanting to do with that parcel that fronted Tierra? In
So
red.
here on the slide, the red one is not the one that we're talking about. That's the one that has applied. We do not have an application south of Sunflower. Sunflower says IND/AGR. And I don't know why this laser isn't working for me to be able, I just don't know if oops. Hey, can you fix it? I broke it. What did I do?
Is there a man in the house?
Thank you, Phil. I don't know, this is not my
Anyways,
usual clicker, but,
Let me ask you,
Tierra del,
Right.
the community is south of that IND/AGR, and that's just a little snippet. It goes way to the west.
so
and a
the
little
area south of IND/AGR, that's Tierra Del Rey?
It is.
Okay, so, and this is for Lisa, but you just stay there for a minute. Lisa, one of the requirements for this commerce would impact that outline in red? Is that,
Well, the staff recommendation would be allow the red to be processed, but not anything south of the red one. The industrial is already there, but it wouldn't allow those other ones. But we don't have an application in process for anything further south. So
that open land could fall within the commerce designation?
it's up to the board's today decision if they want to allow further south than Rio Grande, or they want to stop it at Rio Grande. If the board decides to stop it at Rio Grande, the only way that other site could come in is if they did a private text amendment, which, everyone can always apply for a private text amendment.
Okay. And what is the property directly across all that residential area? And I should know this, because I live in
So
it.
it's a great question. In the package, and I apologize, I didn't make copies for all of you. It's a pure residential corridor. on the other side of 441. You go
What
from
is the name of that?
well, you go from the Dakota, and then you go to
Okay.
Saturnia, and then you go to the bridges, and then you go to the Seven Bridges, and then you go to the Oaks.
That's the back exit to the GL developments that front also on Lions Road.
441 and Lions.
Right, okay, very good.
But for us, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. We appreciate the staff's recommendation to not go south of the Rio, for the obvious reasons. Okay? Appreciate it.
Commissioner Kerner?
Thank you, Mayor. And just for my own understanding of the procedure here, whatever the board, should the board pass something today, there's no site-specific or property-specific entitlement that's applied today. It would allow them to apply, and then we could then also consider the comments that are site-specific from the neighbors and whatnot.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is John Channing, and I'll be pretty brief because I know we want to be brief. I do support the staff recommendations for the Commerce CMR for the light industrial uses. And I think it's important to point out that according to a map that I saw that Jennifer Morton did, I think you might have had copies of, there seems to be only 3 or so locations that would apply to this particular ordinance, unless I'm mistaken. So it's not like it's a lot of different locations. I think that the one-story product that you have to develop as far as light industrial, you don't get the density that you typically can do with multifamily. It's because you can't go vertical. So everything is one story. So it's a little bit different type of a design issues that we deal with. So that's something to keep in mind. And I thought staff did a very good job on this. I thought that they put it together well, and it makes a lot of sense. So I support that.
How isolated is this as far as application?
I'm sorry?
What area are we talking about would be encompassed by this new?
Properties that were located on Atlantic, mostly east of State Road 7, on Boynton Beach Boulevard, and on State Road 7. I think when Mr. Channing was referencing the 3 acres, that would be any that would be over 16 acres and require the preserve requirement, because we already have 6 sites applying already. But right out of that 6, only one of them is bigger than 16 acres and is subject to the discussion on the preserve requirement. But there's only 2 other sites in addition to that one that would even apply ever for this type, according to the analysis that Jennifer did.
Very good, thank you.
Our next speaker will be Barbara O'Donnell, followed by Joseph O'Donnell. What's that? Did you want to
Joe,
speak?
you can come on up and tell us what's going on.
Okay, her comments are written. Please protect the Ag Reserve 60/40 preserve requirements in new future land use language.
No, Joe, you can't have her time.
Hey, before I get started, I have a question, a point of clarification, please. A number of us over lunch were talking about this. We're a bit confused. When you voted and approved transmittal, we were told in the public meeting that there would be opportunity to change what was in the transmittal. And then I heard, and others did too, earlier, when we were talking about residential, workforce housing, the concern among the commissioners about changing something that was in the transmittal.
I think what you heard in the last discussion from Commissioner McKinley and others up here was that things were changing that they didn't feel that the public had an opportunity to hear. But this body certainly has the opportunity to make any changes it feels appropriate and to push those forward for transmittal.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. It is consistent with what we've understood.
Your time starts now.
Okay. First of all, we agree with staff's recommendation on frontage, and on distribution centers. So, the one caution I have on distribution centers is please don't let a precedent on Happy Hollow Road, where a landowner wants to have a transaction, negatively impact its neighbors and then set a precedent for distribution centers, despite what staff's report says, in the rest of the ag reserve. Preserve areas, we don't agree on that. It's absolutely critical we maintain the 60/40 preserve requirement. 50 acres CMR without a preserve, we have a perfect example of what that results in, and that was the distribution center proposal on Starkey Road, which was on 50 acres, no preserve. It resulted in a 1 million square foot building plus substantial parking for 18-wheel tractor trailers. It's a big deal when we say no preserve. And it's totally inconsistent with the ag reserve. The 60/40 came about because of density concerns, infrastructure concerns, and possibly most importantly, although I wasn't there, water. And I would ask the commission to consider this seriously. You're supportive, or let's say we're entertaining the idea of a land swap primarily because of water on Hyder West. Why doesn't water management matter in the rest of the ag reserve? It certainly should. Again, that's part of why the 60/40 was created. You cover the land up, there's no more percolation, there's no more water purification, it's gone. And the stormwater storage you've discussed earlier today has no impact on percolation, except it possibly hurts it. We're not against it, but it takes the water away. So that's not a solution to water percolation in the ag reserve or water management. Our proposal is the first 16 acres of any size development requires no preserve. However, anything over 16 acres requires a preserve. So if something were 50 acres, instead of no preserve, it would have 16 acres with no preserve and 34 acres with a 60/40 preserve requirement. It's a compromise meant to work. I actually think I'm finished.
Joe,
I didn't plan on that. That's never happened before.
Okay, well, you got 11 seconds, but Joe, we've had discussions, obviously, offline, and you were in support of what was going forward until this last iteration of the 50 acres, right?
No, I was not in support of, Commissioner Kerner would certainly remember this, I was definitely not in support of your judgment on the commission's judgment on having 50 acres with no preserve requirement. Never in support of that. And I think if you would talk, and I know a number of times commissioners here have said they'd like to hear from more farmers. There's a lot of farmers here today that understand this topic, and I can't imagine even one of them will say that it's not important to have water preservation efforts in the ag reserve. And again, that's what the 60/40 is. And then I am going to run over. And then remember, the whole dialogue around the Hyder West project is water management. We have that issue in the ag reserve right now, and we have the opportunity not to screw it up by keeping the 60/40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sachs, you're recognized.
Joe, don't go away so fast. Would you, and thank you, Mayor, for asking the question. On the other issues on this commerce clause, or the commerce land designation, is this, I feel like I'm in con law here, right? Is this, are you, you and your group, do you consent to the other issues? And that would be no heavy distribution centers and frontage only on major thoroughways like Atlantic Avenue, 441, or Boynton Beach?
As long as the frontage requirement includes as long as the frontage definition, and this is critical, includes the requirement of access and exit to the property from the main thoroughfare.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right, next we'll have Arlene Berry, then Melissa McEwen, and then Suzanne Movahill.
Hi, good afternoon. So the Commerce Road designation, the industrial designation, I think it's too heavy to have tractor trailers, so many tractor trailers going in and out of the industrial area and blocking people's entryways in these smaller roads. Atlantic Road is really small now, Starkey Road is small, and in general, it would contribute to more traffic. And I don't think we have the infrastructure for it yet. The commerce designation proposes, what we propose will cap the acreage at 50, but that's been removed, the preserve requirement in its entirety. The very suggestion of waiving preservation is troubling and clear motivation for developers to step in and utilize open space. Staff is proposing commerce designation west of State Road 7. That could be used as a precedent for creating that whole corridor as industrialized. So it's like a domino effect. If you approve that, other things are sure to follow, and that suburban, urban sprawl that we were talking about earlier, that would be realized. So this area has traditionally been used for agricultural uses, and the equestrian businesses, which require green fields and the trails. That was what Palm Beach was for so many years. That made it beautiful. That was our heritage. So I would deny the Commerce Road future land use designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Following Melissa McEwen, we'll have Suzanne Mulvihill, and then we'll have Joe Mulvihill.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Melissa McEwen. I live in Deerfield now. I'm here to support my family, my mom, Suzanne, and Joe that's coming up next. We are long-term landowners in the Ag Reserve, and I personally know the hardships of owning property there and facing, policy changes at the board here. But I'm happy to support what staff has brought before you today. We've talked about in the past about, from 20 to 40, 50 acres, those property owners being left out of the plan. And that's something that the property owners there have felt. And this policy change allows some opportunities for them. It's got the location requirements, it has acreage requirements, and we support it. So we hope you will too. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Suzanne Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road in Delray Beach. I want to first say thank you to the commission and to the staff for this recommendation of what was transmitted, of 50 acres or more with no preserve. As you know, our family is the one on the list that we submitted an application in April, and what I heard is that there were accommodations that were going to be made for a new applicant who's submitting an application in November. When we heard today of people who have come up and have been addressing this issue for 30 days, one woman mentioned that, another gentleman mentioned addressing these issues for 8 months. We have been dealing with them for 8 years. And the reason we've been dealing with them for 8 years is because, as my daughter had said, we were left out of this plan. And we brought this issue up 8 years ago and began helping one farmer at a time. And in 2014, the commission said, on a case-by-case basis, we addressed those 3, and we addressed case by case. And now we're here. I heard a lady earlier today say, no case by case. So I am asking to do the right thing. To do the right thing for the property owners that were left out of this plan that includes my family. We bought this property before these policies were put and blanketed our property. And not only did we help the property owners that have been helped one by one, but the staff recognized in 2014 that people had rights that were taken away and they were granted back. They didn't even have to fill out an application. So Wawa got their 5 acres, that land got sold. All these little parcels got their rights right back. And we've had to fight for our rights to get them back. And that's what justice is all about. I mean, we stand behind these flags that say justice, fairness for all. And that's all we're asking for. This policy is obviously needed. As Commissioner McKinley said earlier, plans, they change. The master plan was never even adopted. It was never adopted. Yet we have been stricken and limited by these rules. So we have, and I respect all of you for how well you have come to understand what our issues are. The particularities of each particular landowner, that one by one you've been addressing them. And we're almost done. You won't have, I said to my brother, what are we gonna do? Maybe 10 years, we're done. We don't have, I mean, we have lunch together. We've known these families since the 70s. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Mulvihill Nursery, 9821 Happy Hollow Road, Delray Beach. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Anyway, you guys really all know my story. I've been coming up here and telling you for 8 years now. You know, we've been in the nursery business since 1976. We actually signed the contract on this property. It'll be 30 years ago next month. And, you know, the nursery business is tough. I mean, this year was really, really a tough year. The last 2 years were pretty good, but as good as they were, it's as bad as it is this year. You know, I'm dumping, I don't even know, $400,000 worth of product that I didn't sell over the spring. You know, all of my costs are going up, like Kevin Costello said. You know, fertilizer's up $20 a bag. It's hard to get labor. And replying to some of the people that say, you know, the nursery property with the amount of water, like I use 50 million gallons of water a year on my farm. And when it rains, all my water gets pumped out because, you know, it'll flood my plants if it isn't. So it's not like I'm retaining any of this water when we get rain. Look at my notes here, I can't really read anything. And with the response to Happy Hollow Road, I probably have 10 to 12 semis a day going in and out. I probably have 50 cars, a bunch of pickup trucks, landscape trucks coming in. And when this, we will not be using Happy Hollow Road for our the project that's being put in. They're having a bridge put in across 441. And, you know, there'll be a beautiful buffer on the south side of Happy Hollow Road, so people won't be able to look into my ugly looking nursery, which code enforcement is on me right now. Ramsey's over there laughing. I got to take my fence down that's been up since 1985. But I'm, you know, trying to clean it up now because, you know, it's the right thing to do. Anyway, so please support my project. I thank you, staff, and I thank you, commissioners and mayor.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next, we'll have Sharon Merchant, and then the Linkuses are on deck, and then Dagmar.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Sharon Merchant. My client is Gold Coast Logistics, and I sent a letter via email to you a couple days ago so that you would have an understanding of the one particular item that my client is concerned about. When I'm done speaking and you call on Dodie Glass, she can go into much greater detail if you like. She's the planner for the project. The only concern we have about this is the proposed limitation of the application of the commerce land use on parcels south of Rio Grande. We feel like the The commerce land use should be applied fairly and equally to all of the parcels in that area, in the ag reserve area that is included in your proposal today that you're reviewing. And that's it. Otherwise, we like it. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. Otherwise, we like it and we would support it.
Thank you.
All right, so we have Jandy Linkus, Tim Linkus, and Dagmar, and Dodie Glass. And if you could be prepared to speak immediately after the person before you, so that we can keep this process moving.
Tim Linkus, 8289 West Point Beach Boulevard. I just wanted to say that I support this, what's been transmitted for this commerce, and ditto goes for Sandy, too. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir, fair point. You had clicked, you do not wish to speak, I apologize, but that you support it. We'll have Dagmar, then Dodie Glass, and then Heidi Mahaffey.
Wow. I don't know how our previous commissioner, Board of County Commissioners, were so smart to come up with a commercial cap in the ag reserve of 1 million square feet. Ain't no commercial cap or industrial cap here. It's gonna go on and on and on. What Lisa Amara brought forward is 6 projects that are already in the process, and you haven't even adopted the language yet. Those 6 projects, as she said, are over 1.5 million square feet of industrial use in the ag reserve. The ag reserve is being developed, or in the past has been developed, with the intent of servicing the needs of the residents in the ag reserve. We already have approved a couple projects, smaller ones, which we supported, but you also have your industrial property that's on Atlantic Avenue just east of 441. I'm not sure exactly how many acres that is, so I'm not going to misquote. But this kind of intense use in the ag reserve, all of this industrial, do we really need this? Do we really need a 40-acre site that's going forward? Your State Road Business Plaza, 40 acres, Mulva Hills just speaking, requesting up to 784,000 square feet of industrial use in the ag reserve. Was that really the intent? Were they shut out of the process? No. They could have sold their units a long time ago to a developer and lived comfortably for a very, very long time. We have big developers in the room, and we have big attorneys representing these properties. And guess what? It hurts. I've been doing this for free for a really, really long time, and I don't think this was ever the intent of the people who found the ag reserve. You want to know where the Mulva Hills will be? On a really big-ass boat with a big old airplane when they get done selling their 40 acres. Thank you.
All right, next we'll have Dodie Glass and Heidi Mahaffey.
I'm Dodie Glass. I'm representing Gold Coast Logistics, which is one of those properties, and if staff could go back to the map that they had of the 441 corridor, and let's talk about those parcels that are kind of left out of the decision if this is a land use decision that stops at Rio Grande. You have 3 small parcels south of, and this was in the material that was sent to you. I have maps with me in the material if you'd like it. But you can look south of that industrial/ag, and there's already things happening there. In fact, historically, there's been things happening there. Though I guess online, if you look, you'll see the cricket stadium is there. That's a parcel south of the parcel I represent. In fact, I represent the 2 parcels north of that. And yes, there is an ingress-egress to La Arena. Historically, anytime you have ingress-egress, that's dealt with in a site plan approval, and it's dealt with appropriately. What we're asking for is just the same consideration that you've listened to the Mall Hills, and Roby DeReal wasn't here, but his mother for more than a dozen years has been trying to deal with her small tract of land in the ag reserve. What we're asking for is just consistent policy and the idea that just allow us to come in like everybody else with a proposal. And let me remind you that light industrial uses
cover things that are ag-related, and that nursery uses and other uses are a part of that. And contrary to some of the statements, the Ag Reserve was created not just to support the residents of the Ag Reserve in other service provisions, but to protect and promote agriculture because it is an industry. It is a use. And historically, we had those preserve requirements and distance requirements because we know that when you put residents next to ag use, there can be concerns. And yes, policy changes over time. I totally get that. I started with the Ag Reserve in Palm Beach County more than 30 years ago, and I've seen a lot of change of policy. I'll keep my private opinions to myself. Bottom line is, you have policy, it makes sense not to exclude those parcels. They still have to come in for a land use plan amendment, a rezoning, and a site plan. They have to address all the same issues. They meet the other location requirements, being able to have frontage, being able to be in an arterial. So we're just asking for the same treatment. We're not asking for anything more or less. And yes, maybe someday it should be commercial and office or whatever, but that's not where the policy is. And that shouldn't be a choice made by anyone other than the property owner. And why would they not be given the same consideration as other property owners when they meet the same criteria? I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ramsey?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, Dodie mentioned the cricket stadium. That's an illegal use. It's under code enforcement along with a whole bunch of other issues with those two properties with the stable. So we're investigating those, but it is an illegal use that I think it might be actually in fine status that's been going on for quite some time. So I just want to clarify that.
All right, excuse me, following Heidi, we'll have Linda Smith and then Drew Martin.
Thank you. Heidi Mahaffey on behalf of 1,000 Friends of Florida and Sierra Club Loxahatchee Group. I want to take a little step back to the transmittal hearing on this. There was a lot of discussion about the 16-acre preserve requirement and the 50-acre preserve requirement. And the county staff, the board, decided to cast the largest net to the DEO to see what would come back. It's very rare that the DEO has any comments, and just because they don't have comments doesn't mean that they're supporting or giving their blessing on a particular recommendation. But you did receive comments back from the Florida Department of Transportation and the Treasure Coast, and what they did say was, and I'll quote the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council first, that the overall trend in the reduction of agriculture uses is of concern. And what the Florida Department said, even though you've taken out distribution, there is still a concern about warehouses and wholesale that can include, and I quote, as proposed, since the uses could involve higher trip making and significant level of semi-tractor trailer truck trips that may cause undesirable effects, danger, or disturbance upon nearby areas and immediately adjoining uses. 1,000 Friends of Florida and Sierra Club respectfully request that you deny this proposal. There are a number of issues that we have with it, and the first and foremost being the removal of any preserve requirement at all. That's completely inappropriate in the agriculture reserve, which has been set aside for low-density, non-residential uses to encourage and promote agriculture, conservation, water, and environmental uses. Some more specific concerns that we have and recommendations is to preserve the remaining agriculture lands and fully implement Objective 1.5. The ag reserve is at the precipice of being built out, with the remaining agriculture lands being traded, given away for development or commercial purposes at an alarming rate in exchange for lower preservation or no preservation at all. Requiring no preservation is the antithesis of the ag reserve principles. The very proffer of waiving preservation requirements is troubling and a clear motivation for developers to step in and utilize open space for commerce. Open space is incredibly beneficial to the ag reserve and to the community as a whole, the county as a whole, as it provides buffers for development, sequestration of carbon for climate change, and that really important water filtration. Rather than opening up this land and reducing preserve requirements, the county should focus on acquisitions of land to remain preserved, convert it to green space, and go back to the original unique farmland and wetlands that created the ag reserve. The commerce designation is not restricted to local uses. And we have great concerns with the allowance of industrial uses west of State Road 7. That has always been a hard line in the sand for the county staff because of the relation to the National Wildlife Refuge. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Following Linda Smith, we'll have Drew Martin and Lorna Wallach.
Linda Smith. I still live in Jupiter, Florida. I enjoy coming to these meetings because I learn quite a bit and careful. I want to get everybody to keep coming to these meetings so you can learn and then talk about it more intelligently at the next meeting. I think I heard access to major roads. My question would be who designates what the major road is this year. Obviously things change. Maybe next year the not major road will become a major road. I don't know. As a human being, I do feel the pain that has been discussed about those who have owned land before the comprehensive plan. That is very heartfelt, and I understand. Personally, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for folks that bought property after the comprehensive plan has been discussed in the past. But there is also, unfortunately for them, eminent domain, and a possible out would be for the county to buy them and maybe at a premium. I mean, I don't know the rules and regulations for eminent domain and that sort of thing. I understand that they cannot sell as much as some of their neighbors and things like that, and I feel for them. I do. I understand that this is not a site-specific, but just a general thing. And I would just say that particularly since it's not site-specific, this is kind of another example of one of those thousand cuts that has been evolving the Ag Reserve out of existence. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Following Drew Martin, we will have Lorna Wallach and then Sam Cintron.
Drew Martin, on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club. One thing I wanted to clear up is the statement was made that we were involved in the consensus discussions. Did you say Sierra? Because we did not feel we were involved.
No, I invited to the table those who provided constructive criticism. I didn't invite Thousand Friends or Sierra to the table because all of the comments, and I read it 3 times, were all just, don't do it. So I didn't include your group because you would have come to the meeting and said, don't do it. So I included only those that provided ideas, Bark, Sarah, Cobra, and the applicants that provided ideas and discussion.
Okay, I just want to make it clear that we were not involved in that process. I think what we're trying to do is speak for the long-term benefit of what needs to be done. And the question is, with climate change and resiliency, is there really a long-term benefit to opening this up really wide open to industrial? Now, there has been some industrial that benefit bona fide ag uses, but the very people that want to expand that are the very people that don't want to stay in the ag reserve. So it's really contrarian to say, oh, let's have more bona fide industrial for ag uses, but we're not going to be around because we want to sell and turn it into industrial. So the reality is that this is just an uncapped plan to just go wild and build more and more industrial. And even where you're trying to limit it, they're going to ask you not to. We're really concerned when you remove preserve requirements on a large property like 50 acres because that's what's holding the ag reserve together is the preserve requirement. So when you give up the preserve requirement, you're really just opening Pandora's box because if one person doesn't have to have preserve requirement, the next person is going to show up and say the same thing. Well, I don't want to have it either. So the real question is, if people aren't going to farm out there, then maybe we should just turn it into wetlands and open space because ultimately, as Mr. O'Donnell said, you're not going to get any environmental benefits once you lose this land. Now, we think that there are viable farming opportunities. Now, they're not for everybody because farming is technologically changing, but the reality is people aren't going to stop eating. And so somebody's going to have to farm, and they're going to have to farm somewhere. This has been an area for farming, and you also see a lot of horse farms which are very successful. If you allow more and more industrial in there, you're just competing with the ag uses because they're going to drive those people out of business, because as the people who own those horse farms said, they don't want to be next to industrial applications. They don't want those people. You heard the gentleman has that, HOA that's mostly people with horses. They don't want an industrial application next to them. So what's going to ultimately happen as you approve these things is you're going to drive these people out. And as you drive these people out, you're going to change this from being a nice place to live, and it's going to turn into an urban area. And when it turns into an urban area, it's not going to produce the kind of tax revenue you want, and it's not going to produce the kind of beautiful scenery that you see in a place like Joe O'Donnell's horse farm. So is that really what you want? I hope you're going to think about that when you make this decision. We saying don't go forward, vote no.
Thank you, Drew. Following Lorna, we'll have Sam Citron and then Barbara Roth.
Again, I appreciate you calling me up again. I did say most of my comments this morning, but I do want to support what the Sierra Club is saying, particularly listening to all that has occurred today. More and more, initially earlier, I was actually like, well, I think some light industrial, use would be probably a good thing. But now listening more and more to what's emerging here today, I'm really not so sure. I'm just not for it. I think, again, we need to go back to the drawing board and really look at what's best for the county. We need to preserve the ag reserve. We need to really slow down and look at what we're doing. So I am not supportive of this, even though this morning I was thinking I might be supportive of it, but I'm really not at this point. And again, I thank you for the time and calling me again.
Thank you, Lorna. Following Sam, we'll have Barbara Roth and then Steve Wallace.
The Ag Reserve has been chipped away for years with the continuous segmentation of preserved parcels that were once contiguous and increased densities and intensities that are encroaching on agricultural open space and environmental and water resources. I'm for the Ag Reserve. We see in the West now there's a big drought. Farmers are hurting. The 7 states, they're being asked to cut down on water. I think Massachusetts has a problem with the drought, and there's places where with a sea level rise, with flooding, people are dying, and so we should be, in case of an emergency, we should have a cushion as a country to pick up the slack. Not worry at the last minute, then now what are we going to do? And as far as the farmers, I support the farmers. That's how we sustain our lives. We have to maybe give them tax breaks or do what we got to do to keep them happy. We need to support our farmers. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Instead of opening up, do what we got to do. There are other farmers who are being subsidized with milk or whatever. Work with them. Somebody talked before about working with people. Let's work with them to keep them happy. Instead of opening up this land and reducing preservation requirements, they should do the opposite. The county should focus on the acquisition of lands to remain preserved and converted to green spaces, possibly expand the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Nobody talks about wildlife, the biodiversity that's being lost. And our future generations are going to be at a great loss. Wetland restoration, additional tree canopy of natural plants such as a cypress to assist with water quality, carbon sequestration, and buffering environmentally sensitive areas, and return the Ag Reserve tier to the unique farmland and wetlands composition rather than facilitating sprawling developments, and that includes helping our farmers. We are destroying our native biological communities through various forms of land alteration, water table lowering, and reduction of the quality of water entering these areas, which, by the way, is what we need to live, water. And now we have contamination, algae blooms, PFAS chemicals, everything else. What are we doing? And everybody needs that. The farmers, everybody. And again, I support the farmers. And reduce the quality of water entering these areas, which are the major threats to the county's native plants and animals. Therefore, I deny the application for a Commerce FLU designation.
Thank you. Following Barbara Roth, we'll have Steve Wallace and Dr. Lori Vinacore.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, again, for this opportunity, and also to staff. COBRA greatly appreciates being at the table and being considered in this discussion. COBRA's been around 41 years. I've been around for 19 of those in this area and have been following these issues carefully. Probably not quite as long as my colleague who just left, Dagmar, but a long time. For COBRA, what's important and has been important is to preserve the ag reserve. At the same time, COBRA, as more communities have come into our area, we recognize we have to be responsive to their needs. Again, to services that provide for what our communities want. And I've said this publicly many times. More of our members in COBRA are family communities than active adult or senior communities. So we want to be responsive to those communities in the Ag Reserve who have families who are looking for uses that would fall under a light industrial classification. So we're committed to that. But I urge you to consider two things, precedent and preserve. The preserve issue, I went back, it was torture to watch the Planning Commission of March video. I forced myself to do it, and it was very, very hard. It really is. I see the Vice Mayor smiling, but it's very hard to go back and see how we came from that to something now which is saying no preserve on those smaller parcels. Mr. O'Donnell mentions perhaps looking at a percentage on that 34 acres between 16 and 50 acres. I remember hearing a discussion about that at length where there was some issue of adding preserve in percentages. I thought that made sense, but at least let's get some preserve because the precedent that it sets if you don't have preserve under that. And I know it's going to be said, by staff that there aren't that many parcels left, but precedent is a dangerous thing when it opens the door. So I ask you please to consider, I urge you to look at preserve on all of these parcels. And again, I thank you for listening and respecting our input.
Thank you, Barbara. Following Steve Wallace, we'll have Dr. Lori Vinacore and Kevin Costello.
Hi, everyone. Once again, Steve Wallace, suburban Boynton Beach. I have the privilege of being the current president of COBRA. And I will tell you that I'm happy that the hearing is today, because when I read both of the staff reports, the prior EH and the current Commerce flu staff reports, I was writing the eulogy for the Ag Reserve. I started remembering Mourner's Cottage because that's what it looked like to me. What I can tell you most importantly for us is we need preserve. And the way that and again, this is a big step for us, like I mentioned to you on the last one, we are supportive of the concept of the Commerce FLU classification because like myself, I live in a family community and there's a desire in the Ag Reserve, certain uses are missing, like the karate studios, like the gymnastic centers, some other services like light auto repair. We don't really have that. We have to go all the way east or we have to go north for that. So when we're supporting this classification, that's what we're envisioning. We certainly do not want, and we're happy that staff took it out of this report, that we certainly don't want any distribution centers. We don't want any last mile centers. The concern though, as it stands right now, a 50-acre parcel could develop up to 1 million square feet. And I can call your attention, There's a lot of those types of projects. I personally, in my other life as an attorney, I represent some of those projects on Belvedere. Driving north from my home, going up here, right on the right-hand side, Duke Realty has a large industrial project, which it basically is on 50 acres. So we don't want that type of project in the ag reserve. Again, as I've stressed numerous times in front of you, we don't believe the infrastructure is there. So what we're asking is treat this commerce FLU just like you treat commercial in the ag reserve. Anything over 16 acres, you respect the 60-40 preserve. That's all we're asking. Again, if I was a commercial landowner and I saw this use come in after the fact, I would be very upset, because most of the uses that the community is desiring, and a lot of our resident communities have taken surveys of what kind of uses when we were evaluating whether or not to support this. And some of those uses, like I mentioned, the karate studios, the gymnastic centers, those don't fall neatly in the commercial zoning, but they do in this classification. Again, these are all uses that support the residents and the business, and that's really what we're looking for. Additionally, we think it's important, just based on the fact that a lot of the ulterior roads can't really support these trucks and these larger types of vehicles. We would ask, if I could just have 1 minute, just follow up. We would ask that the frontage and access, ingress and egress, is on those main arterial roads. And then lastly, just something to consider, when you're evaluating these projects going forward, you may want to consider some type of design criteria to keep it in line with the agricultural nature of the community, and I will credit my friend Joe O'Donnell for that suggestion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Next, we'll have Dr. Vinokur, Kevin Costello, and Brian Seymour.
Good afternoon, Mayor Weinroth, Vice Mayor Weiss, and Commissioners. I'm Lori Vinokur, the President of the Alliance of Delray Residential Associations. I live at 10626 La Reina Road, Delray Beach. That's in the Agricultural Reserve. It's in Tierra del Rey. My president is here today. And my property actually is adjacent to this particular parcel that you said it might be silly considering anything south of Rio Grande not being included in commerce. And I'll explain why we have solutions that might help everyone. The Alliance comes up with solutions, and we work with the people. We have landscapers there. We have used that little road that we're talking about. We share it with a landscaper. Very difficult. I live on that road. It's very difficult to work with the landscaper, but he now sold to this logistics, who actually did send us their plan. And I'm going to just give this to the staff so they can see this logistics center that they're planning to put on 6 acres. You can see it's almost completely all cement, but that's just their plan. They had shown that to us. We work with Sunflower, and we supported Sunflower because they had issues. They wanted to stay nursery, and they had to have that industrial, and they do have an overlay. We work with them, and as a matter of fact, Sunflower is adjacent to my property, and I supported Sunflower. But there are issues here. We showed you back in April, the entire southern portion here is just all residential, and or the preserve, which is here, which may be 1,250 residential homes in the future. We don't know that, but it's preserved. There's only one little teeny weeny itsy bitsy commercial spot here that was grandfathered in because it had Maria's Lemon Ices and Land Track Realty 30 or 40 years ago, and they sold those farmettes that are in Tierra del Rey and Rio Poco. You would not be excluding anybody by just approving today north of Rio Grande Avenue. You wouldn't be excluding it. You'd be just making policy like you always do. Make policy. That's what you're supposed to do. If you could approve the commercial north of that, there's nothing wrong with squaring off the corner of Atlantic Avenue. We do it all the time. We did it with the Canyons Town Center. We did it with the Marketplace. And we even had it squared off with the industrial that's just north of Dakota across the way. Well, we went to the other side there, but it's squared off. South of there, we had suggested other things that could be done. We suggested in our letter in April there could be some professional office. There could be limited general daycare centers. Oh, and even with talks with the HOA of Tierra del Rey, they would even love to bring in more residential. And residential might be able to go on smaller parcels there. Remember, they can't go on smaller parcels now, the policy's not there, but maybe that for in front of this residential development. We don't want something to happen like with Iron Horse has all the issues that it has with the trucks coming in and out and up and down Jog Road, and they have issues. So if you could direct staff to further research the uses and just to avoid the issues like we have in other areas where it is not a good transition between different types of land uses. Thank you so much.
Vinokur.
Following Kevin Costello, we will have Brian Seymour and then Brett Gelsomino.
Kevin Costello. When Sunset Elementary was built, I received a letter from Adam Putnam, the Commissioner of Agriculture, asking me to be very judicious about my application of pesticides because I had a nursery within 1,000 feet of their school. Not only that, I have a 6-lane divided highway that runs right in front of that nursery. So I have to be careful to do no harm to my neighbors. And I think I've done a good job of that. But be that as it may, I bring that up because I want to illustrate to you the complexities of running a business in a environment with residents. You know, I'm not one that wants to poison the environment, and I don't want anyone coming to me and saying that I made you sick. I believe that, as Joe told you, agriculture is getting very difficult to continue, and it's more so difficult in an urban environment. And I think that you guys should acknowledge that some of the best farmers, and I'm not referring to the Bedners here, I'm referring to like the Pontanos and the Whitworths and the Thomases and all these guys that were, you know, generational farmers. They were so good, and they're gone. And there's a reason that they're gone. You know, NAFTA, they'll tell you lots of reasons, but it's not because they wanted a big-ass boat or a plane. You know, they already had money. It was just farming was just difficult. Moving on, if I have, I don't know, over 100 pieces of equipment that I run, and if one of them breaks, I have to drive out of the ag reserve to get parts for it. I can't run to Windmill for everything because they're a retailer. I have to buy wholesale supplies. I need businesses nearby. That would be my dream, so that I don't have to keep paying retail for everything, you know? And furthermore, I would like to see these commerce parks come in so that people could work closer to their home and not burn up gas and congest our roads. So I think there's a lot of good reasons for having these. I'm not convinced that small parcels need to have a preserve. Joe Donald's my neighbor on one of my pieces. He wants me to promote that, but you know, I'm not sure that that's really necessary because the 60/40 rule was really designed for the big developments from my perspective. And I'm not sure that it really was helpful to the intent of the plan at the time it was written, because you know the mechanics really weren't incorporated into Lake Worth Drainage District's plan. So, you know, I want to see preserved, but maybe these small parcels it doesn't apply. And I would like to say that I don't have a problem with distribution, but I don't think 1 million square foot is really appropriate. But you know, smaller distribution centers, you know, by all means, you know, let's make these guys profitable.
All right, Mr. Seymour, then did Brett leave? Okay.
Yeah, I think he did.
All right, and then we'll have Gail Ladd and go from there. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you very much. For the record, Brian Seymour, here on behalf of BBX Logistics Properties. They are the contract purchaser for the Mulva Hill property, right? We're going to be very upfront about this. So we were here at Transmittal. We talked a lot about the need for the commerce. You just heard some of it right there. It's even good for the farmers. We also discussed the concern with the preserve. The preserve has a disparate impact on the commerce uses because they can't cluster. You can't go up. You can't take, one home that would have been on 1 acre and put it on a tenth of an acre and put them all together. So there is a different impact on that. And that's where we were talking about the issue with the preserve. You all said transmit, but go talk. And there was a lot of discussion, and I want to give Lisa particularly a lot of credit. She took everybody's phone calls. She had meetings. We all talked, and nobody got everything they wanted. And so there's imperfections, and that's a lot of the argument. At the end of the day, what's being proposed works, and we would support it. There are things in there that are guarantees, like access. It already says it. You have to not just front, but it's now added access on either, not just on major roads that could change, they're named roads, Boynton Beach, Atlantic, State Road 7. So for the Mulva Hills, you actually take all of Joe's trips off of Happy Hollow, if that ever gets approved, and put them out onto State Road 7 directly. And Happy Hollow Road doesn't have that traffic at all, because that's part of what's here, and we agree that's a fair way to go about that. All the design stuff will have to come later, because this is a text amendment. This isn't even allowing the Mulva Hills to have the commerce use, or anybody else for that matter. It's literally a text amendment saying, if we're gonna do industrial, and we have, as Lisa said, and we know there's a need, this is the parameter with which we need to work. And then you can come ask, and by the way, when you come ask, you can't, as you do in some other cases, just ask for the land use change. You have to show the plan. And we agree to that too. We're gonna do it all up front. Everything has to be together in that comp plan so that when you see anybody coming in, including us, that says, we'd like to utilize this land use you've now created, we got to show you what that means. How does that impact the neighbors? Where's the buffers? How do we deal with the design? How many square feet? What kinds of uses? All of that stuff is going to come, and we're going to have to deal with that. And, look, it gets flexibility. Things change over the course of time as to whether it's a gym or whether it's a small distribution facility or whether it's cold storage. But having that ability in that community is critical, and this starts that process. This is the beginning of that process so that we know we have some parameters moving forward that we're all going to live by. It's not going to be case by case. So we ask that you approve what staff has recommended.
Mr. Seymour, question. Obviously, I think we all appreciate there's a difference between a property that's 10 acres and a property that's 50 acres. What is your thought as far as that 50-acre property having some amount of preserve, some percentage, giving them a free pass on a portion of the property, but having preserve requirements based upon?
And I heard that earlier, that someone proposed 16 acres, but then everything over with the 60-40. The problem becomes we still have to do retention, we still have to do parking, we still have to have circulation.
Retention could be within the preserve.
If that could happen, that changes the dynamics some. The math, would need to be done, but certainly, look, we'd be willing to work. I do think that if there was, if there is some, trying to make sure I say this correctly, I certainly don't need Chris Capolini, who's the engineer, coming up and beating me over the head. Some ability, if we were to be able to find some, 60% is still a lot. And you can't, that you're taking out.
My calculation is that it would take you to 29.6 acres that you could use if we took 16 out of the equation and did a 60-40 against the rest of it. So you'd pick up 16 plus 13.6, you'd come up at 29.6.
So the problem becomes, all that other acreage isn't usable acreage in any other way. So if it's,
retention.
So if we're allowed to use that in other ways, and again, I understand that there's a lot of implication to this. So if there's some specifics, we can get there. But I do think that is something that we could then help make work. I still think 60 is a lot, to be honest with you, because you can't use all of that. I mean, at 50%, you couldn't use all of it and I think we're going to talk, if we're going to talk about retention, I want to be clear because the EHR came up and y'all talked about it. It would have to be enhanced, just like when they get to use some of theirs. So that can work, right? I think that can absolutely work. But if you're talking about 60%, you're still losing a ton of acreage because your water and your buffers are not going to equal that 11-ish, 12-ish acres or whatever it comes, or 20-something acres. I'm really bad at math. That's why I went to law school. By the way,
That's why you
every
went to law
lawyer in the
school.
room, to the point of law school, every lawyer in the room laughed at Commerce Clause. Did you notice? Like every one of us chuckled at Commerce. It was brilliant, right? Everybody, it was great. And that's kind of what we're talking about here too, right? Is how that commerce works. How do we interact with one another? And trying to figure out a way to make that work.
Okay, I thank you.
All right, we'll have Gail Ladd and then Maria Baltobis.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the commission. I'm Gail Ladd, and I'm still from Jupiter. One thing that I want to say before I start is I was very sad to hear that Sierra Club was not invited by the staff to talk with them. And I think we all need to agree to disagree sometimes, and just because we're disagreeing, we shouldn't be left out of the conversation. So that's just my opinion. Objective 1.5 clearly stated that the environmental and water resources would best be preserved in development concentrated east of SR7 in order to protect the environmentally sensitive lands within and surrounding the Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge, as well as ensure that growth is clustered appropriately where infrastructure and services already exist in order to reduce the costs and impacts on taxpayers. And finally, new development should occur as planned developments within preserved areas. Now, commercial is definitely needed, and karate studios sound good for families, but I want to make sure, and I hope you understand and make sure, that all the commercial uses should be either ag-related or related to the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your comments.
Good afternoon. Maria Pisano, Jupiter.
Can you just pull the microphone down a little bit? Thank you.
Okay, is it better? Okay. Hi, Maria Pisano from Jupiter. So many people have spoken already, so I will single out the comments by Ms. Heidi McAfee and Dr. Brax, and ditto those comments because those resonate with me the most. As you probably noticed, I'm new at this, so it's very difficult for me to come and speak here. But I live in Jupiter, and you will say, oh, you're here commenting about something so far removed from you. The reason I came to this hearing is because I truly feel that we need to preserve our wild areas, our agricultural areas, our undeveloped areas, and that the county should really focus on the acquisition of land that is going to remain preserved. And there are many reasons for that. Just mention, my water quality issues, and also changes in our environment, climate change. So we need those green spaces. We need undeveloped properties rather than more commercial property, in my point of view. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
All right, Mayor, we next have two non-speaking cards. David Vargas supports without preservation, and Jim Knight supports commerce land use.
Mr. Knight, you're standing. Does that mean you want to?
Oh, he clicked both. He wants to speak and also not speak.
I told you, he cannot resist a microphone.
Jim Knight, 740 Havana Drive, Boca Raton. Couple of comments. First of all, 10,000 acres preserved in the Ag Reserve. Want to remind everybody about that. We have a little thing called the transfer station, 41 acres of land. On that 41 acres, you could fit 800,000 square feet of building, give or take, right? There's 125,000 square feet of building there. There's zero preservation on the transfer station. It was good for the county. Maybe it's good for the private sector as well. Perro Farms
There's 40 roughly acres there. There's 250,000 square feet of buildings there on the Perros Farms, and there's in excess of 150 semis on there. So farming has semis coming and going too. I'd like to speak to, there were 7, I think, applications or something they talked about with these smaller locations. Landscape Services, it still hasn't gone away, the issue out there. We're still trying to get people out of Heritage Farms. I've had the pleasure of selling a couple properties to these landscape service companies. One is Top Cut, which went on part of the Homerich property. And under the code, they'd be able to build 70,000 square feet. They're building 5,000 square feet. They need a place to store their vehicles. They don't need a great big office. Dixie Landscape, they could do 170,000 square feet. They're doing 10,000 square feet. I believe, Joe, now after my trip to the Orange County Convention Center yesterday about how difficult it is for nursery guys. I was up there for the landscaping show at the convention center. For you to be packed, bunch of people like a shopping center convention. I got up there. It was pretty depressing. It was beautiful with some of the trees and stuff like that and so forth, but I have a piece of property for sale down in Parkland. It's currently a nursery. I had no less than 15 nursery people. I was going around knocking on the doors. Maybe you want to expand and come down to Parkland. They're like, we'd like you to sell my property too. So the nursery business is going through a very difficult time. The last thing I wanted to make a comment about is on Happy Hollow. I believe the county stopped the process of connecting that Happy Hollow to 441. I think that was Commissioner Sachs that said, nope, we're not going to connect that through to 441. And I think it was pulled off the process or whatever the county does for where they're going to do roads and so forth. And I think it's a good thing that the traffic would all come in and out off of 441, reducing the traffic on Happy Hollow Road. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. All right, we are now through the public comment section. I'd like to give everybody 5 minutes just to take a little break. We'll come back at 2:45. Please come back at 2:45 so we can get going.
Six applications currently. They are not for commerce. So earlier this summer, when we have our intake rounds for amendments, there were some requests for essential housing and for commerce at that time. I did not have those allowed to be intaken because we didn't yet have an essential housing future land use designation, nor did we have commerce. But again, this gets back to the fact that because there's not a prohibition of individuals requesting industrial, we intook those applications as a request for industrial, but we don't have any current, they can shift should commerce be adopted to that, but just to clarify, they're not currently for commerce, they're for industrial.
Thank you very much. And offline, I had asked Ms. Amara, why 16? And it was pointed out that this was a number that was brought to us how?
It was brought to us at the transmittal hearing for a series of amendments in 2016. Jennifer and Lauren were processing some private text amendments, and we had a county-initiated amendment at the same time. And staff was proposing preserve on everything, even down to a commercial site as small as 3 acres. And the board was having the debate, and then one of the attorneys for the applicants said, hey, how about 16 acres and up, have the preserve? And that's what was gone with, and because it just so happened that all of the private text amendments at that time, or the private subject sites, were 15 acres and under. So that's where it came from. It wasn't a scientific formula. That was the batch in 2016 of the neighborhood serving commercial that we were directed to go forward with.
So we could finesse that number today.
Absolutely. It didn't have a scientific basis.
Okay. Commissioner Kerner, you're recognized.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And I'm not going to make any motions, but because I have to be to the canvassing board soon, I wanted to make sure that I got my comments to the board and to the public and to the record. So I think I may disappoint some people in the crowd today because initially I was the one to if I recall correctly, at the transmittal hearing, I was the one that supported and injected in the conversation having no preserves, which is a far departure from where I have been from an ideological perspective. Even Mr. O'Donnell came to me and said, wow, I'm really surprised that you would even contemplate that. The reason that I did that was I wanted to have a very fair and candid and good faith discussion and evaluation. And we tasked the applicants and the landowners and COBRA and all the organizations to go and work with the staff and have an honest, good faith, that gentleman spoke about earlier, good faith negotiations about trying to resolve this. And Linda Smith talked about learning is important and that she comes here and learns, and I appreciate that. I come here and learn. And as we evaluate this, I wanted to have all options on the table, and I've done my own due diligence throughout this process. And even Ms. Mulvihill, you said that you appreciate how well-informed we are and how we go out of our way to learn about even site-specific issues in the Ag Reserve, and that's really our duty here if we're going to do our job right, which is certainly what this board endeavors to do. And I should be candid with you that I don't represent 1 square inch of the Ag Reserve. In fact, I don't really represent COBRA from an electoral standpoint, because the only neighborhood in COBRA that can vote for me is the neighborhood that I live in. And that was because I had to live in my district, so when we redrew the lines, I had to make sure that I was in my district, otherwise I would not be a county commissioner anymore. That's an aside. And then Barbara Roth spoke about very eloquently, when we make a decision here today on this issue, that we take into account 2 things, precedence and preserve. And that was very impactful to me, because one thing that I have learned about the logistics and commerce and all those things, how our economy has changed even before COVID, but certainly accelerated during COVID and now after, is the way that commerce and logistics and products move within the U.S. and throughout the world is very important to our quality of life. Certainly when there is a backup in the logistical supply chain, we all are very well aware now what happens. And so I'm very sensitive to that. We see what's happening with Moroso or PBIR and how there's a real need for these commerce uses, particularly in South Florida and in Palm Beach County. And so I kept an open heart about these commerce uses not being able to fully capture the density or land use available to them because of the restrictions and, quite frankly, the way commerce works. They can't build multi-story. They can't utilize all the space. So I'm sensitive to that. And being sensitive to that, I'm willing to negotiate on some of the requirements that go into this, and I think that there's a willingness for this board to pass something here today and allow these applications to come in. I certainly am of that perspective as I sit here and having heard everything for a very long time. But the Ag Reserve, and people come in here and they say, well, the Ag Reserve is dead and we failed you and this and that. Well, the Ag Reserve was designed to have housing, it was designed to have commerce. A commercial cap was put in place, as I think Barbara Roth stated, or Dagmar. But the heart of the Ag Reserve and what has made, there's a reason why people want to build houses in the Ag Reserve versus other areas of the county, and that's because it's a very desirable place to live. And whether people farm there or not is not something that I can control. We can't force people to farm. I know you wear the shirts, but we can't force people to farm. NAFTA and all these things that have been discussed, those are the influences that affect whether there will be local farming in our community. Having said that, the Ag Reserve has worked in that we have put parcels into preserve status, and thereby we have increased open space, and those aren't going away. We did purchase land, but the heart of the Ag Reserve that I don't represent and that I don't live in, but is important to the overall picture of this county, is that there be preserve areas when the county commission allows you to build things on it. On the other hand, and Mayor Weinroth brought this up, I think we need to have preserve requirements for this land use, but I am personally willing to talk about lowering that requirement. I ran the numbers about what you were trying to accomplish with Mr. Seymour, and I think if I did the math right, if you flip the 60/40 to 40/60, I don't know if that works for your client, and I don't mean to be rude, but if it doesn't work, again, that's not my problem, but I am trying to negotiate and find a way to make it work while maintaining the heart and soul of our requirements, which is, to me, the preserve requirement. So I'm happy to contemplate some sort of negotiation on reducing the 60 requirement. I don't want to go down to 10 or to 20 or things like that, but what are your thoughts on the 40/60 versus the 60/40, which is the current requirement?
Well, your talents are wasted in law school because your math is really good.
My talents were in present in law school.
That's
so it worked out well.
Yeah, so honestly, yeah, we want as little as possible because of the loss. But with the discussions and trying to find that middle ground, we appreciate that, and we appreciate the discussions and with Cobra and everybody else. So doing that sort of a flip. And being able to utilize that for the enhanced environmental retention like you have in the EHR, that I can't remember the exact language off the top of my head, but it's all written there. But if we could use that 40% as well for that, again, enhanced, not just water retention, we have to do more, we can make that work.
Okay. And as to some other points related to, in case I can't vote, but I do intend to stay here and vote, I understand that staff's recommendation on the Rio Grande limit was because you get down into residential areas, and I don't think commerce is appropriate in those areas. I think on 441 North, also Boynton Beach and Atlantic, I don't know that there's a whole lot of residential density in those areas. Those are my thoughts on that part, but I have to stick to access, frontage and access on those major arteries. And, given all that, I think that if we can get to that point, it's something that I'd be willing to vote for. Maybe you don't need my vote, maybe you don't want it, but if you do, that's what I would do. But for me, moving forward, I have to protect the preserve requirements in the Ag Reserve.
Can I ask for just a clarification? Because, again, my math not good, and I was just told. We had talked about, with Commissioner Weinroth, the 16-acre minimum still have, the first 16 acres not having the preserve consistent with the commercial, and then everything over that would be this 40%. That's how they got the math to work. So it wasn't 16 acres on, so if you have 0 to 16, there would still be no preserved like a commercial. And then everything over that, so if you have I can only do simple math, so if it was 36, the next 20 acres would need to have 40% preserve.
Well, let me ask a follow-up question. Commercial now under 16 doesn't require any preserve?
Correct.
Okay.
And what we had talked about in all this negotiations is that it would be really peculiar to have a 16-acre parcel or 15, I can't remember if it's over or under, have 0 preserve, and then all of a sudden you jump to 17 and that has a 60/40. So what we had discussed, and it's something that Joe mentioned, is that if you're a 17-acre preserve, your preserve can start on the 1 acre because you're getting that like credit for that 16, and that's like perfectly logical, and that's the way we should have written it for commercial. But that's what staff would support for this one, which it's extremely hard to explain, but Brian tried, and Joe tried, and now I just tried. But so you would. You kind of get your first 16 acres free, and then and then it goes up incrementally.
I'm not trying to pick on, I think your client has a large parcel, so I'm somewhat agnostic on the preserve requirements under 16 or under 20, whatever the board decides. I don't feel very strongly one way or another about it, and I'm not picking on, it's just a 50 acre is a big site, and I think there's only one of them.
It's 40, but
40,
yeah.
And so
the O'Keene parcel, I think, is a little over 50 in total. We were about 40, and then most of them are, I think there are 2 others that are not already under contract for essential housing, or the Erickson parcel's over 50. But there would be a total of, I think, 3 parcels that are over that 16 acres that would be subject to this.
Okay.
With the frontages.
I'm really agnostic on it, so
I understand.
whatever. Thank you.
I appreciate it very much.
All right, let's Keep working on that. Commissioner Sachs, you're recognized.
It's very interesting, the idea of 16 acres free. Then when you get to 17, then you're in the 60/40, preserve requirement. So if, and that's why I went to law school.
Well, but the
'cause I could-
60/40 is
the six-
after the 16.
After the 16.
Right,
So if
so
you
it'll
go
be
to
f-
16 and a half or 17, now you've got an additional heavy requirement of 60/40. So if we could do this
Only on the 1
incremental-
acre.
Yeah, the
If
wording.
you have 17 acres, then you would only be doing the 60/40 against the 1 acre.
That's correct.
Okay, I
But-
just want to make sure that you're...
Well, but if somebody could get around this by buying a couple of parcels with 16 acres or small, and then combining them into one big distribution center or something. So if we can work, where did Patrick go? Anyways.
Where'd Patrick go?
Well, there he is. I like this conversation that was started by Commissioner Kern. I didn't think of it before, but this is something where if we could possibly work on this a little bit so that we can make it fair, and we can be sure that people don't try to disrupt that by buying a number of parcels and then combining them under different corporate names and getting around the preserve. Secondly, and then I'll be quiet.
Really?
No.
You promise?
No, never. Is that I think some of this depends on what kind of business you're doing. I mean, if you're doing, look, I live there, and I've got to go to Windmill Sprinkler to get all my irrigation parts. I've got to go to the county feed store. If I had a hardware store or someplace, something that would provide goods for those who live in the ag reserve, then this would be a unit that would be of benefit to the residents of the ag reserve, which is what it's all about. But if it's a heavy distribution center with trucks going in and out, then it's a little different in terms of what we would review. How we do this with staff, I don't know. But I think that if possibly, we could review this in a way that would depend on what it is that the applicant wants. Is it a feed store? Is it a hardware store? Or is it a heavy pesticide, store that could be noxious, and we really don't want to give them all this space? But I like this conversation that was started by the commissioner, because it makes it a little more, look, the ag reserve is a livable, working area. It's not, sometimes we look, oh, we're killing the ag. No, it's growing, and we need to do certain things there to balance residents, equestrian farms, and we need some commerce there. So, but in a balanced way. So, staff, we were talking here about this incremental additions to the 60/40 requirement after the 16 free acreage, and I would certainly be amenable to that as well.
All right, let's...
One of the things that we can do as well along those lines is to not require it 16 and under, but to determine the preserve or the water quality improvements and all that, and the case, when the FLU amendments, for those sites coming in that are 16 acres and greater, we have to come back for a FLU amendment anyway. The applicant and the board can decide on those preserves, and looking at the context of the layout of the property, and if they're proposing, Brian had a bunch of language about littoral zones and shelves and plants and vegetation and water cleaning, those kinds of things can come back later with the individual applications. That's another idea for the board to consider.
Vice Weiss?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, thank you to staff, and also thanks to the public for being here and all your input. This is very valuable. I agree with my colleague, Commissioner Kerner. I opposed this when it first came through because there was no preserve requirement. I'm willing to listen to something reasonable, but and so I appreciate this discussion we're having right now, and hopefully can find something, but unless there is some sort of preserve requirement on properties greater than 16 acres, it's not going to be something that I could support.
Thank you. Commissioner Marino?
Thank you. And
My 90-year-old dad owned a hardware store when I was growing up, so I grew up in a hardware store. But that is, actually, he's in it. There you go. He'll be 91 tomorrow. Actually, though, a hardware store would be commercial, correct? Okay. Trucks still come and go in here because if you're a landscaper, you're getting your materials with heavy equipment, right?
Mhm.
Okay. I do like the idea of the 16 acres exempt from having a preserve, and I do think that a 40-60 split as opposed to a 60-40 split. I too was uncomfortable with the larger properties not having preserve, so I think this is a good compromise. So I would be happy, I know there's probably still going to be discussion, but I would be happy with the the first 16 being exempt and then 40-60 after that.
All right, we're going to take Commissioner Bernard, and I think then Commissioner Kerner wants to make a motion.
If that's okay with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. You know, when this came up the first time, I did support to move it forward, but in regards to this whole item, you know, we have a commercial cap, and you know, now we're if we have industrial, there will be pretty much no cap, and the minute you approve it, everyone will come to us and say they want this exception and this exception. This probably needs to be in. So, you know, I'm struggling with whether or not I would support this whole item whatsoever. But I do believe that there needs to be a preserve requirement. And this whole idea of changing the rules to 40-60, I think that we shouldn't go to that level, because then the commercial folks are going to say they need to be 40-60, and then we've changed the rules on the Ag Reserve, which is we adopted this on a 60-40, and it stood for a long time. And I think that we shouldn't just rush to a 40-60 just to accommodate just one single group. So I'm not for the 40-60 if we need to stick with the 60-40. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernard. Okay, Commissioner Kerner, it's your turn.
All right, so I'd make a motion that contains 3 to 50 acres, frontage and access, must be on State Road 7, Atlantic and Boynton Beach. Oh, you can't hear, I'm sorry. 3 to 5 acres, frontage and access, State Road 7, Atlantic, Boynton Beach, 40-60 on 16 plus. Are there other issues that need to be adjudicated?
All of the the first row, second, third, fourth, the only item that we really need direction on, because everything was published in the packet with all of the consensus items, which are above the first row, other than Rio Grande, which accidentally fell off the slide, and then the preserve. So you only have to make the motion subject to the preserve requirements. All the other ones are going to be included already in the packet on the
Gotcha.
adoption slide.
So I would make a motion to preserve the preserve requirements at a 40-60 on 16 plus.
Is that with the enhanced environmental?
What's that?
Commissioner Sacks, turn.
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, did you say it fell off the Rio Grande there?
No, it's not on the slide, but that's still a point of
it's
contention.
included.
Rio Grande. Rio Grande would be the hard line with the adoption column, unless you bring it up and want to abandon that. It would be included to cut off at Rio Grande.
I support the Rio Grande cutoff only because staff has indicated it's near residential, but I've never been to Rio Grande. I've never seen the area, so I would defer to whoever. And what are your thoughts on going
It's
south
a big
of?
river. But no, I absolutely, I absolutely agree with those who spoke about none of this going south of that cutoff on 441. I just
So-
want to make sure that it's on there. Thank you.
Okay. So, and Mr. Seymour can respond.
With the 4060, the ability to use the preserve for the enhanced environmental water retention as well.
Yes, I would like to include that in the motion as well.
One point just on that point, because I think it's important, as it was written for the essential housing, the stormwater component, the enhanced stormwater component was limited to no more than 10% of the preserve area. So I don't.
All we're asking is the same language except without the 10%.
So that the whole preserve could be water?
It doesn't end up the whole preserve because of the way the math would end up working. I just can't do all that math on any particular site because that was done with all the people who already had the sites. But again, because if you have housing, you go up, their 10% was usable. If we have 10%, then I'm still losing the rest of the square footage. So it would all have to be enhanced. It would all have to provide that. But yeah, we'd like to be able to use up to the entirety of the preserve. We'd have to show it when we come with an actual plan on what that would look like, but it gives us the opportunity to try to make it work as we plan.
Well, I wouldn't come with any plans where the whole part or the whole preserve is water, but it's
Understood.
less important to me here because it's not residential versus the EHR essential housing was. So
Thank you.
They can use a preserve for.
If I could just interject here for a minute. I tried to do some real quick calculations for you so we could talk with some conceptual numbers, and I invite anyone to check my math on this. At the 16, and then you at 40% of whatever you have that increment above 16, at a 20-acre site, that's 4 acres would then be subject to the preserve. That 40% of that would yield 1.6 acres, which is 8% of the overall 20 acres. So if you go all the way to the logical extreme, at 50 acres, which is as big as I think we're talking about, that's 34 acres. That's the delta above the 16. That's 13.6 acres, or 27% of the overall project would be preserved. So it's way off of a 60-40, but we're talking 40-60 with an increment. But those are the real world numbers as I could do them. I'm just not smart enough to come up with a formula in 5 minutes. But we'll get there.
I don't know the math either, so I don't know what good public policy is on this issue, but.
A liberal arts major before I went into design.
All right,
so.
do we have clarity for the clerk as far as what is being proposed by Commissioner Kerner?
Mayor, could someone repeat the items that are being contemplated in the final motion?
All right. Commissioner Sachs, before you ask your question, let's just make sure that the clerk knows exactly what's on the table so that we keep this well documented. Lisa, why don't you put up the slide again?
And Brian, the retention needs to be on site, though. You understand? Okay.
100%, it would have to be on site. Because all your retention needs to be on site anyway. But yeah, we would agree. It would be the similar language to what's in EHR, where it is required to be contiguous to the development area. All we're asking is that 10% be removed. Otherwise, we're good.
If I can clarify for the clerk, so for 16 acres and up would require a 40% preserve area, with the first 16 acres being exempt, and to allow water retention within the 40% preserve area, provided they demonstrate an environmental benefit and improved water quality. And we would use the same wording as the EH item on sustainability, and I can't remember off the top of my head the sentence. But
And the frontage and access?
all of the frontage and access in the 50 acres cap, all of those are already included in the published staff report already. But that's the only change, is the preserve item, the bottom row. The other ones are already captured.
Okay.
All right, we have clarity now? I think we have clarity. Commissioner Sachs, you're recognized again.
Said we're not saying that word anymore.
What? We took a break. We can have this clarity again.
Are we ready, Mr. Mayor? Okay. Question to the staff, and I was just looking in your report about it. Does this exclude large landscaping services and contractors and large distribution centers? I know that in the discussion when we approved this, that for light industrial on Commerce, that would then preempt the heavy industrial of large distribution centers, one that was proposed on Starkey at one point, as well as large landscape services and contractors.
This would allow landscape service. As far as the word distribution facilities would not be allowed. However, we do allow some level of office warehouse and distribution. We'll have to look at those when these sites come forward. They're all required to have a site plan, and we would adopt the zoning and the land use together on the same day. So we can refine that level of detail as each project comes forward.
Very good. So we'll look at these as they come forward. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we're foreclosing Gold Coast Logistics from this conversation. What is their opportunity for development?
They could propose a private text amendment. They would have to meet with staff, and they have not submitted an application to date, but we have, private text amendments. We have one on the agenda after this one, so it's a very common procedure. If somebody, the rules don't fit for them, they apply for a private text amendment, so that's would be their avenue after today.
Oh, good, we can have a conversation all over again. All right, Commissioner Marino.
I was going to ask the same question, because I don't think the preempting of, the cutoff of Rio Grande is necessarily fair, but in the site plan, when the site plans come to us and we're talking about preserve area, if there is a parcel that is near a residential parcel, I would hope that the preserve would be part of the buffer that's between the residential and the development. But I am not a planner. I don't play one on TV. But that would be, we're trying to mitigate the residences that surround the industrial, commercial, whatever, commerce, whatever hat you want to put on. And we need to do our best to protect them. So I don't think the Rio Grande cutoff is necessary, but I will go with the rest of the board.
All right, I want to get this vote done so that Commissioner Kerner can be part of it. He has to go to the canvassing board and pretty quickly, so let's go ahead and call a roll call.
Commissioner Kerner.
Yes.
Commissioner Marino.
Yes.
Commissioner McKinley.
No.
Commissioner Sacks.
Yes.
Commissioner Bernard.
No.
Vice Mayor Weiss.
No.
Mayor Weinroth.
Yes.
That's 4 aye and 3 nay.
Okay, we're going to move on. Commissioner Kerner, go and count some votes. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
We are going to item 16. Commissioner McKinley, did you want to make a comment? Or?
Yeah, I just had a comment. It kind of pertains to some of the conversations we had today on item 11 and item 12. The suggestion was brought up about design standards on these properties within the ag reserve, and I think that's something that probably belongs in the ULDC and not in the comp plan. But I would like to give staff direction to take a look at the design standards. I think Mr. O'Connell's idea of maintaining an agriculture or an equestrian theme is a good one that should be considered.
You may, of course, Commissioner Sacks.
Always ask, always ask. Commissioner McKinley, that's an excellent idea that's actually already included in the Ag Reserve, not master plan maybe, but certainly the discussions that items, that structures there should have a motif that celebrates agriculture and the fact that they are in the agricultural reserve. So I've had that discussion with a number of the developers already, even as to the names of places. So thank you for bringing that up. That is already in our Ag Reserve, what do you call it, Lisa? Not the master plan, but certainly the regulations, that it should celebrate the motif of agriculture. And you'll be finding some interesting ones coming up that we're working on, some interesting names. So thank you, and I thank my colleagues for working on, and of course staff, for working on all these issues in my district. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are back to business. We're going to number 13, Lucky 13.
Hello, Mayor. Hi. Jennifer Morton with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture, and I appreciate the opportunity to present the Erickson Boynton Beach CCRC. I think this will be a very quick presentation. I know it's been a long day for everybody. I just have a few slides, and my client is Erickson Senior Living. They're actually here with me in the audience, so between our office and their office, we should be able to answer any questions that you may have. It's a very simple text amendment. Our text amendment is to request a second location for the CLR land use designation. Several months ago, the board approved language for CLRs in the Ag Reserve. It was a privately initiated text amendment, so it addressed one location for the CLR use. That project was All Seasons, and it's located south of Atlantic Avenue on Lyons Road. We are simply requesting a second location for the CLR use. This is the actual text language here, again, drafted for CLR. We've highlighted item B, which identifies the second location on Boynton Beach Boulevard between the Florida Turnpike and Acme Dairy Road. We also added an item that any uses that are allowed in a preserved parcel for essential housing should be allowed in the CLR use. As if the board approves the project or approves the text amendment, we'll move forward with a project, and you'll see some preserve areas that we're working with the adjacent essential housing development. So we added that in there. This is the site that we're referencing. It's 93.5 acres. And again, it's on the hard corner of the Turnpike and Boynton Beach Boulevard. Here's just some data about the senior housing market in Palm Beach County. This is put forth by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. By 2050, Palm Beach County's population of 65 and older will double. The highest concentration is located in the Ag Reserve and adjacent to the Ag Reserve. This land use category is a needed category for the Ag Reserve. We did our homework. We actually started out before we moved forward with our text amendment. We met with the property owners and the communities that are directly adjacent to the subject site, providing details about the text amendment and kind of a game plan for the project moving forward. We also reached out to COBRA. We actually presented the text amendment to COBRA's Growth Management Board. COBRA Growth Management recommended approval. The Executive Board recommended approval, and the delegates, when they met last Wednesday, recommended approval for the text amendment. When we presented this project to planning staff or to the Planning Commission, they recommended approval. We have a staff recommendation of approval, and we actually received a letter from the communities that are directly adjacent to the project where they state that please accept this letter as a statement of our support for the text amendment change. So we did our outreach. If the board does initiate this text amendment today, we would be permitted to file a comprehensive plan amendment and zoning application and begin to work with the interested party staff to develop the plan for the project. This is our timeline. We did a lot of community outreach prior, and we are committed to continuing that community outreach. Our request is for the board to initiate the proposed text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morton. I am not seeing any questions yet, but we have 21 cards?
He's joking. We have 7.
Oh, okay, only
We have
7.
We have 7 cards, but one is sort of like, I want to speak, I don't want to speak. So we have, I will, Jim Knight, you don't have a card in.
Jim, you
One
can
in.
still put that card in.
Linda Smith, Drew Martin, and Gail Ladd will be our first 3 speakers. Thank you.
Apologies, if you would like, we do have a staff presentation, but if you don't want the staff presentation, that.
We don't want your presentation.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, Commissioner, do you want a presentation?
No, but I have a question for staff.
Sure.
On that last item 12, we didn't vote on the future land use for the urban suburban tier. Were we supposed to or no?
Yes. I don't,
No,
No,
we
I-
did one, we only did one motion.
I did the agenda with only one motion as a package. Although when we did the transmittal, we did it with two motions.
right, so,
Oops.
excellent point. Right, what you all voted on was specific to the agricultural reserve tier, so there is another component for the urban suburban tier.
We have a problem then. It's not going to pass.
No,
we're
the
on-
commerce, but we only did one motion on the agenda, and we're only gonna have one ordinance. I don't know that we need two motions. I mean, I only did the agenda with one motion.
We have an attorney in the room.
Well, I believe last time, yeah, we did do two motions, one for the urban suburban tier and one for the agricultural reserve tier. I think,
What is on,
There's only one motion on the agenda. I think that's the motion that Commissioner Kerner moved.
what is on the agenda? Was it
To adopt
one?
an ordinance for the Commerce Flu Text Amendment. That was the motion on item number 12, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. So if,
so we amended it for the ag reserve, but we
Made no
made
amendments
no
for the urban
amendments to
suburban.
the
Okay.
urban suburban tier.
So what was presented in the staff report and what's presented in the ordinance? I
Would be-
understand.
Yeah,
same.
The ordinance includes both the urban suburban tier and
right,
ag-reserve tier.
right. So, yeah, so I think so too.
Are we okay?
I think we're good.
We're okay. Yeah, it's
All
on
We're
the
good.
documents.
Like, we can't do a second vote on that.
No.
Stay calm and move on.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bernard, your light is still on.
Sorry.
Okay. Ms. Smith, it's your turn.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. Linda Smith, still in Jupiter, Florida, and I know where this is going because K-11 got passed. I've got some questions also about K-12 that I'm going to have to get some clarity on what you could all do, because it sounded like if you had a 50-acre site, you could divide it into 15.9-acre sites with no preserve, but my head's spinning after a long day, and I'm hoping to learn more.
You've been here too.
Yeah, yeah. We've heard the phrase, you know, killing the ag reserve by 1,000 cuts. By my count, this is the fourth proposed cut today that I've heard. I fully expect it to pass, which makes me a little sad, but thank you for your time.
We have to take care of our seniors.
Drew Martin and then Gil Ladd. And after Ms. Ladd is Steve Wallace, who has two cards in.
Drew Martin, I'm here on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club. You know, I'm happy to take care of our seniors, but not in the ag reserve. So, you know, we just, you know, it's unfortunate that our job is to say no, but we really are trying to look at the big picture, and that is to try to preserve. Now, you already have an approval for this in one location, and right away now they're coming back for a second location. This is the whole problem, is every time something gets approved, then it opens the door to the next thing, and then that opens the door to the next thing. So the real issue is when do we shut the door, and when do we preserve agriculture? Now, I think a lot of confusion that we're getting here is that you have a lot of people in the nursery business and they're saying, well, that business isn't really working. Well, they're not necessarily the same as somebody who's growing food. So nursery business may not be working, but that doesn't mean if somebody growing actual crops may be working and they may be successful. As we can see, there are some successful farmers in the ag reserve that are growing food crops. So, you know, when I look at Erickson and I look at the map and I look at the picture of where it's going to go, and it looks like it's going to go out where you have farming and food crops, or something's there that's not a development right now. So it's just my concern that this is just going on a regular basis, that you're continually approving more and more projects in this area. So as you remove preserve requirements, then that opens up more areas to development. And then the question is, are people going to be splitting their lots so they can get out of reserve requirements? So I think, you know, while specifically we are in favor of congregate living, we just have to say in this case we're not in favor of an additional congregate living in the ag reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. We appreciate your comments.
I'm Gail Ladd, still from Jupiter. I thank you for still being here and listening to all of us who continue to say, please don't keep cut into the Ag Reserve. And I totally agree with Drew and Linda, of course, and I think he's so true. When's the third one coming? Or when is another cut coming into the Ag Reserve? I think certainly in favor of congregate living. Of course it's needed, but I think there's a better place for it, not in the Ag Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have Steve Wallace with 2 cards. I do not see him in the audience, but one of the cards is, I do not wish to speak, but Cobra is in support of the text amendment. Okay, but.
Barbara, do you want to take
Support
for...
of such amendment doesn't constitute support of project. We have concerns about height, density, traffic, and site layout.
Okay, we're going to have Barbara come up and take Steve's spot.
Barbara, I do have a card for you.
Oh, okay, fine.
Sure. Thank you. And then after Barbara, our last card will be Neil Ambrosia.
Oh, good, I get to work from this side, thank you all. Steve had to go pick up his children, so, here I am. We were very pleased when Jennifer Morton came to present to us early on this proposition of a text amendment. I also saw it at Planning Commission. This is an example of COBRA being sensitive to its communities that are near this project, the Canyon communities in particular. We also are sensitive to the issues that we know are endemic to Boynton Beach Boulevard and, of course, to Atlantic, but in this case, Boynton Beach Boulevard, having to do with infrastructure, traffic. How are we going to handle those issues with what we know will be more commerce, use, and development? So, COBRA will be watching this carefully. This is just approval for the initiation of the text amendment. We know that Ms. Morton and company will come back to us with details, as they will to you, of course. But density, preserve, infrastructure, traffic, we're going to be watching all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. And the last card is Neil. Is it Ambrosio?
Ambrosio, yes.
Well, the Italians say Ambrosio.
Okay,
But
well, there you
okay,
go.
go for it.
Canyon Lakes, we signed on to that letter. This is a very sensitive corner. It's a big piece of land. It's right off the turnpike. It's in proximity to 2 schools, okay? Sunset Palms Middle, or whatever you're gonna name it, okay? That is a traffic nightmare on Acme Dairy. It can't be widened. It's a very, very stressed corner. This use, like, can I call you Vice Weiss? I love that. When I first heard it, Jennifer, I'll tell you, I hated it. Now I love it. I'm going to tell you why we all love it now. It's the lowest traffic impact. Everything, we've talked to the Erickson folks, it's self-contained. It does not impact the local schools. If you think of what could be developed on 97 acres and what impact it could have on the schools, this won't have that impact. We have some concerns about the impact on the fire service. We've communicated that to Erickson. They're open to talking about it. As you get down the path and they start presenting site plans, you'll start to see they're open to buffering and preserve that somebody talked about to protect canyon trails. This sits in mirror, basically, to where, like, the Canyon Park is. So we think it's an appropriate use. We think it's also appropriate because if you look at the makeup of the ag, you got family communities, you have the Valencias, and now we have a place for people to age out if they lose a spouse and they don't have to relocate. So we think it's really, really appropriate, and when you look at the whole package, you're going to get 4 more looks at this as you get down the path. So just to allow the use, we think it makes a lot of sense, for where it is. I'll give you 120 back, Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, looking for a motion to initiate. Of course, Commissioner Sachs.
If I could have a question to Ms. Morton. I know the hour is late, but I do have a question that we could initiate this. Congregate living facilities are not subject to the requirement of 25% affordable housing units. And I know that Danielle Hartman from the Jewish Family Services, we're always looking for low-cost units. And I wonder if we could start the discussion at some point with regard to possibly offering some of these units for for either, low-income seniors to be able to age there as well. And is that okay with you?
Well, I'm glad to meet with her, and I'll introduce her to Erickson, and we can have that discussion, and they can see what their pricing is. But absolutely, we would be happy to have that discussion.
I appreciate it. And that really brings you into the whole ag reserve idea of essential housing, 25%.
Yes.
So good. I just wanted to initiate this now so that later we can maybe pursue this conversation. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
So can I just clarify? So you're saying just have the conversation with Ruth Rails now?
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the
Okay.
but I would like to see that your client would seriously consider
Okay.
offering some of these units for low-income seniors.
Okay, we will
Thank you.
definitely have that discussion.
Thank
Thank you.
Just share with my colleague, I think one of the challenges with seniors especially is they tend not to have, it's possible that they don't have large incomes, but they have very large assets. And that's one of the real challenges of creating an affordable category, if you will, of how do you determine, you can't determine it by income, which is normally our determination. You have to look at their total assets to understand what's affordable for them.
Commissioner McKinley,
Thank you. I'm having flashbacks to Commissioner Paulette Burdick's days on the board, and we've addressed this issue before. So, I just, in light of recent corrections,
I'm going to strike that word from the dictionary.
I feel like it's a drinking game, corrections that the Palm Beach Post had to issue, for the public's benefit. This is simply an initiation, which basically means the applicant is asking us to just consider this. Nothing has been approved, nothing has been transmitted to the state, nothing has been reviewed by the state. It's simply the applicant asking us if they can submit a formal application, and that is all that is happening today.
That is correct.
Palm Beach Post needed that reminder. They got that wrong in their the last example of this. Thank you.
Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since I've been a no all day today, I'll do the motion to initiate this.
How contrary of you. All right, who wants to clarify that? All right, we have a second by Commissioner Marino. All in favor, all opposed, show it as approved, 6-0. All right, that's the end of this. I know, Commissioner Marino, I think you had something you want to bring up.
I do, actually. I have two comments. The first comment I would like to ask the mayor and the board if they would, the mayor would provide a letter of support for the town of Jupiter. They're putting in a grant application to NOAA for their Sawfish Bay project, and they are looking for our support. And is actually collaborating with Jupiter on this, so I would like, if that would be possible.
Without objection, I will be happy to sign the letter.
Thank you. And I do have one other, as we celebrated my dad's 90th birthday today, I would like to comment on the fact that our Palm Beach County Fire family lost a warrior last week by the name of Brian Molnowitz. Please keep his family in your prayers. He was 44 years old. He battled lung cancer for 2.5 years. His life was brief, but it was powerful, and he was a mentor to so many people, and his service will be tomorrow, so I just wanted to recognize him.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Commissioner McKinley?
Thank you, Commissioner Marino, and I know that you stand with me in how proud we are that this county commission led the efforts to be able to provide our firefighters with cancer coverage ahead of the state of Florida doing it. So if you go to the service, please send our sympathies to the family as well. I would like to ask, I've been in constant communication with the residents in Heritage Farms, and they are interested in exploring the option of creating a rural overlay for their area, and hopefully that'll prevent 5 years worth of conversations that we've had in the past on that particular community. So at this time, I'd like to direct staff to study the area that would culminate in a rural overlay of Heritage Farms.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sachs, what you got?
Just want to say thank you, everybody. We've done a lot on District 5, and I appreciate it. And one day, maybe we'll all take a little ride out to the Ag Reserve. You're all welcome. It's a living, breathing organism, I think, and I'm really proud to and honored to represent the people in the Ag Reserve, especially with my colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just want to thank staff for your hard work. We've got many more meetings
We got
to
some
come.
stuff coming up.
I don't.
And so we're praying for y'all. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
That's great. Vice Mayor, put your microphone on and tell us what's going on.
Thank you. First off, thanks again to staff and for all the work you put into today's meeting and as you do for every meeting. Much appreciated. I've brought this up before. I guess I'm going to have to keep bringing it up till I'm blue in the face. Hopefully I'm not blue, but about simplifying, about moving forward to simplification of the code ULDC to make streamline things both for our people and for the public. It shouldn't be this complicated. I know the board in the past and I believe continues to support this idea. I'm just asking, what is it going to take to move this forward? Do we need to make a budget amendment so that you all can hire somebody to help get this moving? But we'd love to. I mean, it's been going on for over a year now. Well, no, about a year now.
Yes,
so.
when I started it a year ago, zoning division was down 30% staff. We're now almost, I wrote a game plan for Ramsey, and step one was to fill the positions. I hired former planning director Lorenzo Agemo. I promoted or hired 24, well now 25 out of 45 people over the past 8 months. So that's been my priority, to take and fill the positions so that I can start drafting code revisions. So we have some now for electric vehicles, electric signs, they're coming forward. One of our biggest challenges is Article 2. That is the process and procedures. That's going to be one of our priorities. Article 2 is like 150 pages long of redundant, heavy processes, suffocating, and that is going to be one of our first priorities, to scale that back. Bob Basehart, who was a planning director, zoning director, had many years of experience with the county. He's over in Wellington. He took their land development regulations and he dropped them from he had ours. They got our 96 version of the code. They dropped it from this big to like this big. So we're very much inspired. Lorenzo has been tasked to chop Article 2. The other items of heavy burden are the URA, land development regulations, and Westgate. They're very burdensome with extreme rules. And the one thing Lorenzo came up with the other day is we have something called a conditional overlay zone. And typically that process is used to make things more more restrictive. And Lorenzo's idea is, why don't we take that and use it as an opportunity for that flexible property development regulations that everybody asks for. People want flexible signage, landscaping, setbacks, buffers, those things. And so he's like, hey, why don't we use this cause as a mechanism to start right away with affecting, redevelopment and infill in a more creative way. So he just started 2 months ago. We're getting all our staff together, but we will be, I promise, before the end of the year, we will be back with incremental ULDC changes. I promise. And if you've noticed our hearings, the zoning item of this today only lasted a half an hour. We're trying really hard to get most of our zoning items on consent by arguing with the developer and getting solid projects. So our zoning commission meetings and our BCC meetings the past 4 months, unless the public has a lot of opposition, they're typically around 30 minutes to an hour. So, we are trying very hard, but we will continue to cut the ULDC now that we're almost fully staffed.
I appreciate that update. Thank you. But whatever we can do to help move this along, just know you have this board's support, and if there is additional if there is additional funding that's required, let's just get it done. Let's move this thing forward so that, make everybody's life easier.
Right. Patrick and I have discussed this, and we'll come up with a plan. The difficult thing is it's like trying to change the tires on a car while it's moving.
I understand.
And that's, we're so busy, it's just been tough. But, making the code more simple makes our lives easier too. So it's in our best interest, so we are trying, and between Lisa and I, we're streamlining things to make things a lot easier and less complex and a lot more automated.
You done?
I'm done.
He done. So am I. We're done. We're adjourned.